And hello everybody, this is Don Koppy. Today's session for CDT prep class presented by the Tampa Bay CSI and Atkins is on procurement. Better known as bidding, negotiation, and purchasing. It's an important session, especially to people outside the construction industry who may not be all that familiar with the process of procurement, in particular those folks who are in sales. One point needs to be made is that the principles outlined in this session are going to vary within the industry, particularly with each public agency that bids or procures a project. There also may be some variances from what you're familiar with in your own practice and experience. However, these slides are based upon what we call CSI best practices and guidelines. This is a AIA accredited course for Continuing Education Committee. Today's learning objectives is written out here. The process of competitive bidding can be a daunting task filled with anxiety and anticipation and surprises on bid day, especially for your clients if it's a design bid build scenario. Some of this anxiety can be mitigated with just knowing the proper processes and the pitfalls of procurement and alternative approaches. These are the basic subsections we'll be covering today. Noted that procurement is more than just, quote, bidding. It's a process that has many facets and obligations. And again, these processes will vary with each client and owner seeking pricing on an effective project. Bidders, owners, architects, engineers, product reps have specific duties and responsibilities in maintaining the integrity of this process for it to be successful and fair to all the participants. So in the procurement process itself, we're jumping forward a step in the big cycle of facility life cycle. And as you can see from the graphic, procurement, bidding, negotiation, purchasing is at the end of the design process, and it makes the assumption, bold as it is, that the drawings and the bid documents are 100% complete. It is the transition from design into construction, commonly referred to as the bidding phase. CSI has changed over in the last several years to use the proper terminology of procurement. Keep in mind that bidding documents may be issued via a direct selection process, which involves pre-selected bidders or bidder, single bidder, or an open solicitation, which is common for public agencies like local and state government entities, universities, federal agencies, who open to all who qualify. And you can add qualifications. It's not open to every single contractor out there. It's a very specific type of project. Aside from requiring their own drawings and design standards, public projects also have their own procurement requirements. Public agencies are bound by state and federal funding guidelines and regulations, and these may vary from project to project, even within the same public agency. And it's often dependent upon the funding source or grant guidelines where they're basically getting the funds in order to fund the project. Private projects can waive all these requirements and these processes associated with it. However, to provide fair procurement, it's recommended that they all be followed as if it's a public project. On both projects, it's very important for the architect to coordinate with the owner's purchasing agent on the bidding requirements and other requirements, which will be spelled out in Division 00 of the bid document. Let me tell you, even the most experienced specifier will have difficulty with this coordination, primarily due to different terminology used within procurement. There needs to be a public notice issued within the procurement bidding documents, and these might be newspaper ads or even an electronic notice service, such as a notice to bidder or an advertisement for bidder. There are often several supplemental forms and certifications that are required to be submitted with the bid form, such as Buy American certifications for products being supplied for a project. Time and material pricing, again, includes an estimate of probable cost. The contractor is required to document the time, labor, and material costs, but they're not stating that it's going to hit a maximum. It's often used in an emergency situation that requires immediate repair, and a fixed price cannot be determined. A good example is a major underground water line may get busted. The contractor is directed to fix the work, but until the water is shut off and the pipes excavated, there's several unknowns related to the work. This is also used when the owner and the contractor cannot agree upon a final price for a change order. The contractor's proposal is too high or appears to be too high, and the architect is then asked to direct the contractor to proceed via a construction change directive on a time and materials basis. Again, you don't want to use this all that often, but there's some times where you're digging your foundations and you hit bad soil. Well, you have to excavate that bad soil and pull it out, put your new foundations in. That you don't know exactly what is the extent of the bad soil. It didn't show up on any of the borings. It's a concealed condition. So you got to move forward on a time and material basis. Again, another double plus sign. Definition of unit price will definitely be on the exam in some form somewhere. And the key word here is unknown. The general scope or type of work might be known, but the actual work to be completed cannot be defined. It's often used when concrete pilings, the actual length of the piling is based upon an unknown quantity. Piles are driven to some level of resistance, and it may be more or less based upon the varying soil conditions. Contractor bids on a unit price amount, basically $1 per lineal foot, and the final cost is adjusted up or down based upon the actual length of piles installed. Obviously, you need an inspector or someone to track the length of the pile installed and record these on a daily basis. Or on a renovation project, let's say, a number of reusable doors may not be determined until the demo work is completed, or the amount of mildew drywall may not be known. So unit costs may be used to track and define the final cost of the work based upon actual field condition rather than an exorbitant or inflated bid amount the contractor would put in just to protect themselves. Again, you're trying to find fair and reasonable pricing for the work. As I noted in unit pricing, it's very common on civil engineering, road work, and utility projects. Here's a little example of a typical bid form in which there's a place on the form for a unit cost to be inserted by bidders. Note that the cost for a reduction and add may vary in costs based upon the quantity of that vary and add. It's a good idea to give an idea of what your estimated quantities are, because of the fact that you may be, if you're going to do half of them, the unit cost would be a lot different than if you're going to do maybe just a couple more based upon volume. Some samples of unit prices and bid forms and schedules and unit prices. These forms are in the Project Delivery Practice Guide. You'll note that the bid form has an estimated quantity. And the unit prices are bid again. Quantity is determined by the architect or the engineer. And obviously, if there's major changes in it, you may want to look at identifying a different quantity based upon a minor amount of changes or a maximum amount of changes. Purchasing by the owner. Keep in mind that there's a lot of FF&E that needs to be done. Fixtures, furniture, and equipment, security systems, computer systems, artwork, special manufacturing equipment that needs to be brought in. All these are items that the owner is going to procure outside of the construction contract. These are also part of the procurement process, and these purchases are governed by the UCC, Uniform Commercial Code, a national code for commercial transactions across state lines. Documents and bid middle forms should be prepared to ensure an apples-to-apples comparison of prices is obtained. Public procurement using public sourced funds must follow the same procurement guidelines as publicly bid projects. You're basically, just because you're purchasing things directly, you still need to follow the same laws and rules as though it's a typical construction project. Again, it's not uncommon for the owners to purchase goods and materials during the construction project. Proper coordination and scheduling is imperative for the successful implementation of these items. If the contractor is supposed to install the good, then clarifications need to be identified in the specifications on the drawings. The section called Owners Furnished Products in Division 01, Section 016000 Project Requirements will outline these elements of the project, disposition, installation, and accommodations for contractual requirements. The drawings may show these items as dash lines or with a note clarifying the intent of the installation and that the element is owner furnished. Additional pricing consideration. There's an old adage related to the low bidder. Generally, they made a math mistake or left something out. But if you have 5 bids that are very close, that's a good sign that the bid document, procurement documents, were comprehensive and complete. People always ask, what's very close? Preferably, you'd like to see all your bids within a 10% of each other from high to low. And preferably, you'd like to see the difference between the low and second low, or higher bidder, as less than 2% of the project. If you're in those ranges, then you've got a darn good set of drawings. Keep in mind that bidders must be thorough and diligent in assembling their bid. Contacts and established working relationships are key to success with these bidders working together with their subcontractors and suppliers. There are published cost guides like means construction costs, which are a good source for checking square foot costs. You need to take that with a grain of salt, though. Historical data is also very useful in estimating the bidding of projects. So many firms use these costs from project to project, especially if they're specialized in a particular type of project. Good terms to understand, pretty straightforward. We'll cover these a little bit more in detail, but in general, construction cost is the labor and material to do the work. Contingency is a common method to cover unforeseen costs. There's always going to be something to address during construction projects. Drawings are not commodity type items and may have placed misinterpretations in there. Understand the differences of contractors' overhead and profit. Overhead is the business cost of doing the work, not specific to the project, like their own rent, their licenses, their management labor costs, the office utility costs. It's a good idea to get these identified in the bid form for potential future change orders. Profit, of course, is also a financial benefit to the contractor, and profit is the reward for them doing the job right. Here's a list of elements that are considered construction costs. Note that temporary facilities and controls and administrative costs associated with the projects are part of this category, not considered overhead. Royalties and licenses fees for patented items are also considered part of the cost of the work, not overhead. This is addressed in the general conditions and is there to prevent the need for payment or of any patent or royalty fees after the construction is completed. So construction costs include royalties and license fees. Now, costs can vary significantly from contractor to contractor. Some contractors based upon their volume of work, can command better pricing from material suppliers and manufacturers and from subcontractors, and this has a direct impact on the cost of their doing work. Cost of materials can vary based upon supply and demand, where the project's located, how long does it take that product to get there, is it stored on site, and other obvious economic forces. Slow workforces may equate to more competitive bidding. Many project budgets, I should say preferably all project budgets, include some sort of contingency cost. May be included in the contractor's contingency or in an owner's contingency, or occasionally in both. Very common on construction management and design build projects to have a contingency just to cover unknown cost or requirement. If the contingency is unused, then the contractor may share some of the savings from the unused portions of the project with the owner. Another plus sign, very important to understand the difference between general conditions costs that are specific to the project. These are different from the overhead costs and the cost of doing business. Overhead is usually a percentage of the project cost and not related particularly to the project. On the other hand, general conditions, often referred to as Division 01 costs, example of temporary facilities, are part of doing the work. They're a separate line item on the schedule of values and often bid forms. As an aside, you have a large volume of general conditions and extensive administrative and related requirements, then the cost of the work will go up accordingly. Good idea to review the general conditions and make sure that they're specific and applicable to the project. Pretty typical to see a 10% factor. Keep in mind, if you're doing a project like on the secure side of an airport, in which there's much more delay and process associated with just simply getting your products and your labor over onto that side, easy to see a higher general condition cost for a project such as that. Contractors' profit, as we said before, profit is the reward for getting the project completed on time and under budget. May range from 5 to 10%, may be much smaller on much larger projects. Some contractors take the approach that they make up their profit during the buyout of the project or through change orders. Pricing under a design bid build project. Design bid build is the most common, and it's the traditional form of procurement. The bidder assembles and verifies the cost prior to the submission of the bid. For an atmosphere or perception of impropriety when bid shopping takes place. We'll talk about that at the end of the session. Although it's common during the buyout phase, sometimes can result in subcontractors that are unqualified and can lead to major problems during the course of construction. It is common, instead, to provide a list of subcontractors to be submitted to the contractor's bid or a few days following the award of the contract. The owner and the architect have the right to reject subcontractors. However, if they do, There may be added costs, may be required, an adjustment in the contract amount, or using a different subcontractor. Design, negotiate, build, D&B, been touted as the least expensive way to complete construction. There is speed of construction and value-added design efforts that effectively reduce the net cost of the project. It's common to engage a CM for this type of pricing effort and may have contingency to cover undefined scopes of work. It's important to have an experienced owner and experienced AE, designer, on such projects. Pricing under construction management. Construction management usually revolves around multiple prime contracts in which different subcontractors are hired separately and then coordinated by a construction manager. Doesn't always happen that way. Under a CM arrangement, the CM may be an agent to the owner, which is CMA, in which they actually don't provide any work and they also don't take responsibility for the final cost of the project. May also be a CMC or a contractor who's actually going to also not only manage the work but perform the work at risk. The CM is selected based upon qualifications, and the owner benefits competitive bidding by the issuing of various elements of the project rather than just one bid pack going out. There's multiple bid packages, such as there might be some site work, might be a separate bid package for foundation work, separate one for structures, separate one for MEP, separate one for windows, separate one for finishes, separate one for FF&E, and on as it goes. This approach will have an impact on the amount of work that the architect will have to perform, keep in mind, because it's putting out multiple bid packages means more coordination, more work. A CMAR is very similar to a CMC, except that a CMAR may or may not self-perform any work. Typically, they don't do any self-performance work. Yes, CMA, CMC, CMAR, it can all be confusing. But it's as simple as it can state is that CMA is an agent to the owner. Basically, they're not doing any construction. A CMC is a construction manager who's also acts as a contractor, not much different than a typical general contractor, but you're negotiating with the project. And a CMAR is similar to a CMA, although they're taking a risk to deliver the project within a specific amount of money, a specific budget. Pricing under a design-build scenario. Under a design-build scenario, there is one contract with the owner and an entity called a design builder. Design builder can be a firm in which the architects and the contractor are together in that same firm, or in which they form a team. Contract is usually broken down into two phases: part one, design pricing, and part two, construction. Pricing is based on a set of usually referred to as construction documents that are usually about 50 or 60% complete. They're often referred to as bridging documents. And a not to exceed cost or final GMP is submitted off those documents. There's also typically an owner's or contractor's contingency part of the bid amount. And the time and cost of construction is ultimately reduced by overlapping the design and construction phases, the time's reduced, and also the value engineering taking place between the designer and the contractor and subcontractor. As I stated before, a design criteria package or bridging documents are commonly prepared by the owner or consultant. That may be about a 20 to 30% range and include a performance spec or a preliminary project description. This package can then be sent out to design builders to help finish design of the project, the two-stage process, and then actually provide a price to construct the project. This helps the owner establish a basis of design or some sort of a standard to evaluate and accept these design builders' prices, bids. Without this, they would have very little information in order to analyze just exactly what they're getting for that particular price. Owner builders. Very common on repeated projects. You see it often on apartment projects, big box stores, warehouses. This is where the owner serves also as the contractor. And like PM, there may be a bunch of mini bid packages that are issued and negotiated with local contractors. Obviously, there is an inherent risk that the owner takes when serving as their own GC. Greater when the owner does not have the expertise or experience in managing project construction. Often you'll see a project in which a residential project in which the owner takes it over and says, I'll finish it myself, and they don't realize what they're getting into. This can also prove very problematic for the designers. As the owner is the contractor, you can change the quality and quantity at whim. They're the ones that make the final decision. New trend in construction is being used a lot in hospital projects in California is integrated project delivery. Effectively, the project team, which is the owner, the designer, and the constructor, all work under one global contract, and all parties share in a risk-reward on the project. It's a collaborative process where team members work together to design and construct the project. It's touted as a wave of the future. However, this process has not been tested over a very long time. It's very similar to construction management and design-build processes. However, it's a different contractual format, because basically instead of having multiple contracts or a contract between one party and another, everybody signs the exact same contract and all works together. Distribution and control of project information. Document control, distribution, is essential to make sure that the project is bid competitively and with no confusion. Information must again be clear, concise, complete, and correct. It's common for procurement documents to be posted in local plan rooms or electronic bid rooms or on the owner's website where everyone can review them and have access to them. Subcontractors and suppliers may subscribe to reporting services such as FW.Dodd, gain access to information about a project they may be upcoming, or they might be members of their local AGC or CSI chapter and get information on projects that are coming up that way. Often public agencies are now posting their bid documents on websites, and the documents are downloaded by pre-qualified bidders. Sometimes it's not much more than filling out the form in order to become pre-qualified. A lot of quote-unquote blueprinting companies store documents electronically for use by multiple users, and they may be password protected. However, there's an inherent danger that bidders may not get the right bid document or timely update, or they may ask for only a certain set of the drawings, a certain portion of the drawing. They may be the elevator contractor, and they say, "Oh, I only want division 14." They don't realize that there's other sections, other specifications that affect their drawings. In that case, CSI's recommendation that the entire set of documents be issued to every potential bidder. Bidders should be registered and should be required to attend a pre-bid meeting. It helps them understand the basis of the project. Revisions or bid document updates should always be in written form, never verbal, and should always be issued with an addenda with plenty of time for the bidders to react based upon the size and complexity of the addenda. You're not going to issue a huge addendum with a whole bunch of drawings changes, a whole bunch of revisions that affect multiple disciplines and give them just 7 days to react. You prefer to give them much longer if you're going to make those sort of changes. Keep in mind, with the speed of the internet and electronic copies, procurement process can get quickly out of hand. Multiple copies of the wrong documents can be issued, not always recovered. It's a good idea to create composite PDFs and provide all bidders with the same information. Keep in mind, security is an issue with sensitive documents. Several years ago, we were asked to put out a set of documents for a new FBI building in Houston. And the FBI actually wanted us to have it so that you can only go into a certain room in a certain building and do your takeoff. You weren't allowed to bring home a set of drawings. After quite a few conversations with them, we explained to them that when you're going out in the field, you're not going to be able to handle that same level of security. So they allowed us to go ahead and issue the documents to the plan room. Again, control of information, well-defined and well-established set of procedures is important during the bidding process. There should be a single point of contact for all questions in bid documents. Document control and timely responses to questions regarding the document is critical to the successful bid of the project. Don't see any particular questions from anyone. In that case, we'll move ahead to execution of the agreement. So once the bids are in and sorted, you've agreed upon who you're going to work with as the owner, you need to execute an agreement, formally have a contract between the owner and the contractor. The AIA and the EJCDC set of documents are time tested, and there's an entire family of documents as a contractual resource. We presented these in the earlier session. Very important that the consultant contracts and the construction contracts are all coordinated, understanding and utilizing these documents. There are other entities that have contract sets, the consensus docs, for example, have been developed collectively by contractors, owners, and architects, but they do not favor, protect, or benefit the architect as well as the AIA documents. True of other contract providers, such as the DBIA. One thing to make sure is do not mix and match the contract sets and format. Keep in mind again also that you cannot require the use of the standard form of the agreement unless you're a lawyer, unless you're the owner's lawyer. Owner needs to have their legal counsel review the contracts and the Division 00 section. You need to make sure you commit to memory the advantages of the standard using standard contracts. It saves time's tested, they're complete and accurate, they're understood well within the industry, and they've historically had a great track record in the court system. Negotiation process. Negotiation is common on private projects, or PM may be involved on public procurement projects. Negotiation process includes multiple steps. You put together a request for discovery or exchange of documents, through a pricing procedure, obtain an offer or proposal for money and time. There's typically counter offers and value analysis. These get resolved, accepted or rejected. Contractor is then awarded, and the project is executed with modifications as the project moves forward. This slide outlines some of the major elements of the contract for construction. We reviewed the general conditions before, but keep in mind that the general conditions expand and provide more definition of these elements. That is Division 1. Again, note, the owner and the contractor are the parties to the construction contract, not the architect. Additional contract elements. Now, on our initial session that were on the AIA general conditions, covered all the duties and responsibilities of the parties. If you have not done so, please get a copy of the AIA A201 general conditions and read this document, especially if you're going to be taking the test, because many test questions come directly from the AIA A201. Important to understand the flow down. So you have the general conditions of the contract, the general requirements, and Part 1 general, and how they flow down. Questions on that? Talk a little bit about substitutions. Substitutions during bidding. In the instructions to bidders, there should be a good long explanation of how the contractor is to request substitutions for their bid. If a contractor adds a substitution to their bid that is not part of the procurement document, then how can you compare that particular substitution and that particular bid with other ones? So it's important to have a process by which you identify substitutions that are acceptable. We typically say that substitutions are a manufacturer representative's nightmare. They work hard to make sure their product's specified. They do a lot of legwork to help out the architect. But the bidder buys the project out, and the subcontractor has chosen another supplier. They're out like a flash. As the architect, you may want that specific product, but now something else is being provided. Product substitution procedures and a substitution form requiring side-by-side comparison should be used within the specifications of Division 01. This will alleviate any unequal products slipping in. Keep in mind that reviewing of substitutions also greatly increases the designer's workload, and they're usually required to occur during the bidding and also during the construction phase. Addendums should always be used when a substituted product is accepted. Never rely on a verbal approval or some sort of a note. It should be included as an addendum in the specifications change to the drawing. effect. And last but not least, change to the drawings. CSI wants you to do it in this particular order. You need to memorize that order if you're going to be taking the exam. We've covered a lot of information today, especially in terms and definitions. If you're not clear on the components of this session, I encourage you to read the Project Delivery Practice Guide. Maybe more than one section in the guide covering this topic. You may want to consider using the index on the back of the book and reading all the related information. Preparation and working on sample quizzes are also key to doing well on this exam. But I said before, we're going to talk a little bit about bid shopping. You've heard this term, but what is it? We talked about the fact that bid shopping can have serious impacts on a project and can result in a lower quality or an unauthorized substitutions on the project. It's one thing to walk into a clothing store and say, I can get this sweater cheaper at Walmart. But when you're a major buyer asking a plumbing contractor to lower their $1 million bid for work down to $950,000 or else to give it to someone else, simply because you now have the contract to do the work, is flat out immoral. It can be avoided by using a bid depository for pre-qualified subcontractors or requiring the bidders to submit their subcontractor list with their bid or soon after their bid, like the next day, are accepted and the low bidder is determined. If a bidder's list is required as part of the bid and the subcontractor defaults on signing the contract, then this can be a problem for the contractor. The best practice is to requiring the list of sub-bids soon after the low bidder is determined and notice of award is issued. Any further questions? Seeing none, I thank you very much for your time. Next week, we'll have Chip Hayward talking about pre-construction, part 1. Hope you can all join us. Thank you for listening.